scream. My mother always told me never to leave the house at sunset, but I always took my daughter for a walk at that time. I loved witnessing that moment when the sun closed the door to one world, the one I called the sun's world, and opened the door to another, where the night sparkled with countless stars. I had a habit of talking to the stars, and I would tell my daughter about the different ones that twinkled in the deep blue, secret-filled sky. She listened with great attention. My mother had warned me countless times, saying that at this hour, the jinn return to their homes, and if a human crosses their path, they start to play with them. But I always dismissed her words. One day, as usual, I went out again with my daughter at that forbidden hour. The sky was covered with clouds, and the sun was about to set. I told my daughter that the stars wouldn't be visible tonight, and that we should go back home. But she was stubborn. No, Mama, we will sit here until the clouds clear. I won't go home without seeing the moon and stars. I gave in to her insistence, and we sat down. Time passed, and I kept telling her stories about the stars, but the sky kept growing darker. 2 hours had passed, and the blue sky had now transformed into a terrifying blend of darkness, deep, ominous, and chilling. Suddenly, a cold wave of fear rushed through me. My shoulders became heavy as if something had been placed upon them. My skin prickled. It felt as though we were trapped in someone's gaze. But who? I did not know. It was as if dozens of eyes were staring at us, surrounding us from all sides. A cold gust of wind passed by, and my daughter shivered in fear. And then, my daughter let out a scream so terrifying that it echoed into the empty night like it was being swallowed by the darkness. She had fainted. At that very moment, fear gripped me so tightly that I could barely comprehend what was happening. It felt as if someone whispered into my ears, but I could not hear the voice. Only the unsettling echo of a whisper filled my mind. I tried to lift my daughter to run away, but my body refused to obey. The daughter I could always easily carry now felt unbearably heavy, as if lead had been poured into her body. My feet were shackled. I wanted to move, but the ground held me captive. And then, a merciless force yanked me backward and threw me onto the ground. The earth was as cold as ice, and I was frozen in place. Suddenly, I remembered that my mother had taught me an ayat of Quran which helps in these situations. I tried to recite it immediately, but as soon as I opened my mouth, my tongue felt thick, as if stones had been stuffed into it. No words came out, but I did not give up. I began reciting the verse in my heart, and as soon as I completed the last line, I felt an invisible chain break. My body felt lighter, and my senses slowly returned. I grabbed my daughter and ran toward home with all my strength. But along the way, my body burned with fever, my head spun, and every step drained my will. My daughter remained unconscious, and I was walking through a night whose end was unknown. When I reached home, an elderly scholar from an Islamic university was sitting inside. My mother saw me and turned pale. She quickly laid my daughter on the bed, but I stood there, motionless. It felt as if my daughter had died. A sharp pain pierced my head, and my body was drenched in sweat. I couldn't utter a single word. My fear burned within me like an unquenchable fire. The scholar placed his hand on my head and recited verses before blowing on me. Then he asked for water, recited over it, and gave it to me to drink. As soon as I drank the water, I managed to shakily narrate everything to my mother and the scholar. He gently explained that what I had done was wrong. And in that moment, my mother's warnings echoed in my mind, warnings I had always ignored. The same water was given to my daughter. As soon as she drank it, her eyes fluttered open. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the horror of that night had settled deep in my soul. Today, my daughter is 15 years old. Yet even now, as soon as night falls, she trembles. Because my one mistake had led us to the threshold of a world where we were never meant to go. Lesson. From that terrifying moment in my life, I learned that the wisdom of elders should never be ignored. Fate does not always knock on the door. Sometimes, it changes its path forever.